It started with a hoodie. A plain, gray hoodie that didn't belong to me. It was folded over the back of our couch, sleeves tucked neatly like someone had taken the time to make it look unnoticeable. And maybe they would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't smelled like cheap cologne mixed with sweat and something else, something unfamiliar. I didn't say anything at first. Jenna was still in the shower, probably rinsing off a long day at the hospital, and I just stood there staring at the thing like it was a live animal. My first thought was maybe it belonged to one of her coworkers, someone who drove her home or stopped by. But no one ever stopped by. Not without me knowing. The house was too quiet. You know when silence feels like it's holding its breath? That was the living room right then. I picked up the hoodie, gave it a good look, and noticed the tag had been cut out. That was weird. It wasn't brand new. Either the cuffs were stretched, and the left sleeve had a dark smear across it, like oil or maybe something worse. I set it back down exactly how I found it. I didn't want to give anything away. I didn't even know what I was trying to catch yet. When Jenna came out of the shower, she was wrapped in her robe, hair damp, towel draped over her shoulder like always. She smiled too easily and headed to the kitchen to grab a bottle of wine. I sat on the couch, next to the hoodie, acting like I hadn't just found a red flag waving in my own house. She poured 2 glasses, handed me one, then sat across from me on the recliner. She always sat beside me. That night, she didn't. I noticed that too. So, anything exciting today? I asked, keeping my tone light. She sipped, shook her head, and said something about a patient going ballistic over mashed potatoes. I laughed, nodded, pretended to be interested. But I was watching her eyes, the way they kept flicking toward the couch, like maybe she was wondering if I'd noticed the hoodie. And I could have asked her right then. I could have pointed at it, asked whose it was, waited for the lie to come. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I played dumb for the next couple of days. I moved the hoodie into the laundry basket in the hallway, just to see if she'd say anything. She didn't. Then I moved it into the bedroom closet, under a pile of old blankets. Still nothing. She wasn't even pretending to be unaware. She was straight up acting like it never existed. On Friday, she told me she had a night shift. Normally, she doesn't. I knew her schedule better than she did. I used to pack her lunches and plan our weekends around it. But she told me she picked up an extra shift to help cover someone who was sick. I nodded. Said cool. Asked her if she needed a ride. She said no. Apparently she was meeting one of the new nurses who lived nearby, and they were carpooling. I pretended to forget to ask the nurse's name. She pretended not to notice. At around 11 that night, I took the hoodie from the closet, slipped it on, and walked out the front door. It felt tight around the shoulders, smelled even stronger now, like cologne and breath mints and lies. I walked 2 blocks over to the gas station where one of Jenna's coworkers worked part-time, a guy named Tom I'd spoken to maybe 3 times before. We weren't friends, but I knew he'd recognize the hoodie. And he did, instantly. His eyes flicked up to my face, then back down to the hoodie, and he said, "That's Wes's." No hesitation. No second-guessing. "Wes?" I asked, pretending like I didn't already feel my stomach trying to crawl out of my body. "Yeah, the new guy," Tom said. "Nurse Wes. Your wife's friend, right? He's always cold, even when it's warm. Won't go anywhere without that hoodie." I didn't say anything else. I thanked him, turned around, and walked back home like I was in a daze. Not because of the name. I'd heard her mention him once, maybe twice. But because the pieces were already falling into place, and there was no way to stop them now. Back home, I waited. I didn't sleep. I left the lights off, sat in the living room with the hoodie on my lap like it was evidence from a crime scene. At 7:12 the next morning, she came in. She didn't look tired. She didn't smell like antiseptic. Her hair was styled, not pulled back like it usually is after a long shift. She kissed me on the forehead, a guilt kiss, the worst kind, and went to the bathroom. That's when I checked her purse. I don't normally do that. I believe in privacy. But I had already lost mine. Inside, I found a folded slip of paper with a receipt from a downtown parking garage. One that wasn't anywhere near the hospital. One that closed at midnight. That same day, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I took a day off work without telling her, and I followed her. I got in my car, parked a few spots behind hers, and watched her walk into a gym I didn't even know she had a membership for. An hour later, she came out with Wes. Hoodie-less. Laughing. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But I knew. You don't laugh like that with a coworker. Not unless there's more to it. I went home before she noticed. I didn't say a word that night. Or the next one. But something had snapped in me. Something deep, and cold, and quiet. I wasn't going to ask for the truth anymore. I was going to take it, piece by piece. No texts, no phone snooping. I'd find another way, and I'd make her feel everything I felt. Next part? We dig into what I did to uncover it all. Let me know when you're ready for part 2. It gets way darker. The thing about lies is they never sit still. They spread, they grow legs, they leave fingerprints in places you didn't expect to look. I knew something was going on between Jenna and Wes, but what I didn't know was how deep it ran or how long it had been happening. What I did know was I couldn't afford to confront her without proof. Not because I thought she'd talk her way out of it, she wasn't that slick, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed the kind of truth that couldn't be spun or softened. The kind that leaves no room for explanations. The following week, I started leaving for work as usual, but I didn't actually go. I drive a few blocks down, park behind the liquor store on 8th, and wait. Around 9:15, like clockwork, Jenna would walk out in her workout gear. Same tight ponytail, same bright shoes, same controlled pace, and drive off in her car. She wasn't going to the hospital. That much was clear. I tailed her without getting too close, always giving enough space so she couldn't clock my car in her mirror. She didn't notice. She was too comfortable, too used to getting away with whatever she was doing. That first day, she pulled into a little massage clinic on the edge of town. I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe she was just decompressing. But then he pulled in. Wes. In his stupid old Civic with the broken taillight. He parked 2 spots away from her, waited in his car for about 2 minutes, then walked in. He didn't bring a gym bag or anything else. He just looked around, and when he was sure no one was watching, he disappeared into the same place she had gone. I waited in my car for over an hour, watching people come and go. And when they finally came out, I took pictures. They didn't touch, but they left together in the same car. Her car. That was enough. The second day, she skipped the clinic and drove straight to a tiny Airbnb located behind a sandwich shop. It looked like the kind of place people booked when they wanted to avoid hotels. When she parked, I stayed in my car and watched from the alley. 10 minutes later, Wes arrived. They both went inside. This time, I didn't bother with photos. I didn't need more pictures of them entering buildings. What I needed was to know how she planned to lie to me when she got home. So I went home and waited. When she walked through the door that evening, her face looked fresh. Her makeup was different. Her cheeks had a glow that wasn't there before. She tossed her keys on the counter like nothing was wrong and said, "You wouldn't believe how awful the hospital was today. I swear I'm not cut out for these new shifts." I nodded, watching her carefully. Really? What happened? She opened the fridge, pulled out a soda, and leaned against the counter. One of the new nurses messed up a file, and the whole wing was behind schedule. I had to cover for 2 people all afternoon. I'm exhausted. I stood up and walked over to her, leaned in a little, and just said it. "What's his name?" Her head jerked back slightly. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked just enough. "Whose name?" "Come on, Jenna." "I know." She tried to recover. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "I've seen you." "The clinic." "The Airbnb." "Him getting into your car." "You're not working late. You're not picking up shifts. And you're definitely not fooling me." She froze. The silence that followed was thick. Her hand holding the soda can was shaking slightly. Her eyes darted around the kitchen like she was looking for a way out. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I don't know what you think you saw. I saw enough. I didn't just imagine it. Don't insult me." She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it." "We're friends." I stared at her. Friends who sneak around during the day, lie about their jobs, meet up in random rentals and drive off together? That kind of friend? She didn't answer. She just looked down at the floor, like it would swallow her if she stared hard enough. The lie wasn't just unraveling, it was falling apart in pieces so small she couldn't even hold them anymore. That moment was when I saw it in her face. Not guilt, not shame, just panic. Not because she felt bad, but because she had been caught. Her next words confirmed it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." That sentence hit harder than anything else she could have said. She had made a choice, followed through with it more than once, and now she was acting like it was an accident. Like it just happened. "You're not sorry," I said. "You're sorry, I know." She didn't deny it. She couldn't. I left the kitchen. I needed space. I needed to think. But I also knew this wasn't going to be a quiet ending. I wasn't the type to just pack a bag and go. Not after what I'd seen. Not after how much she'd taken from me without ever asking. Next part? Let's just say I didn't wait long to figure out exactly how I was going to get even. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, fully awake, listening to her steady breathing like it was the most irritating sound in the world. She was asleep within minutes, like nothing had happened. Like the only thing she had to worry about was waking up on time for whatever lie she'd tell next. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the small things she'd said and done in the last few months that hadn't made sense until now. I thought about how easy it had been for her to make me feel like I was overthinking, how quickly she had shifted blame when I asked harmless questions. All those late shifts, those new makeup routines, the random gym memberships and never-ending supply of excuses. None of it was for me. None of it was innocent. By morning, I was calm. Not because I felt better, but because I was focused. I knew I wasn't going to scream or beg or ask for explanations anymore. I wasn't going to ask who he was or how long it had been or why she chose him. I didn't need to know. I had enough. And now it was time to do something about it. The next few days, I played my part perfectly. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't accuse or question. I pretended like our confrontation never happened. She probably thought she had gotten away with it, that I was just angry and would eventually let it go, that I was too soft or too attached to really do anything about it. She had no idea what I was planning, and that's exactly how I wanted it. I started with the apartment, the one she and Wes had used a few times. I drove down there again, waited until the coast was clear, and knocked on the door like I belonged there. The owner answered, some middle-aged guy with a heavy beard and half a sandwich in his hand. I asked if he remembered the woman who had booked the place the week before. He didn't want to say anything at first, probably thinking I was going to make trouble. But when I offered him $300 in cash just to let me look around and take some photos, he opened the door. The place was small, tidy, but there were clues everywhere. I found a receipt from a nearby cafe with her name scribbled on the top, one of her hair ties on the dresser, and a used tissue stuffed in the nightstand with lipstick smeared on it, the exact color she wore last Thursday. I took pictures of everything. I didn't care if it made me look crazy. I was building something. Not for a courtroom, not for a fight, but for the kind of confrontation that leaves no wiggle room. Something she couldn't walk away from. Back home, I backed up all my files, every picture, every timestamp, even the car GPS data. I had everything stored in a drive hidden in my work files. She wouldn't find it even if she searched the whole place. Then I got to work on what would come next, the part that would make her stop pretending, the part that would force her to feel cornered for once. The plan came together faster than I expected. Jenna's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. Normally, I'd organize something nice, a small party, maybe dinner with close friends. This time, I told her I wanted to do something different. Just the two of us. A quiet night in. A little home celebration with wine and a slideshow I'd put together of our best memories. She smiled when I told her. She smiled like someone who didn't realize they were walking into a storm. On the night of her birthday, I set everything up. 2 glasses of wine on the table. A cake I didn't bake. A slideshow I definitely didn't build for nostalgia. She sat on the couch, phone in hand, checking messages from people who didn't matter. I told her to put it down. I told her the surprise was about to start. She laughed and said, all right, and set her phone on the table. The screen lit up. At first, it was what she expected. Pictures from our trips, holidays, even some from when we first met. She looked at them and smiled like nothing was wrong. Then it changed. The next picture was the Airbnb receipt. Then a zoomed-in photo of her keychain on the dresser inside that same place. Her smile dropped instantly. What is this? She asked. I didn't answer. The next photo was Wes stepping out of his car. Then them walking in together. Then another of her car parked outside the clinic. And then her face in the rearview mirror, smiling, the way she hadn't smiled at me in months. She stood up. Ethan, what is this? You tell me, I said. Her hands were shaking. Why are you doing this? I'm just returning the favor. You spent months making me feel like a fool. I figured you deserved to see how that feels. She didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at the screen as the images kept going. I let it run. I let her sit in it. She tried to say something, probably to explain, maybe to spin it, but I wasn't interested anymore. This is just the beginning, I said. You're going to tell me everything. And if you lie once, I'm showing all of this to your parents, your coworkers, and every friend we have. She didn't speak. I poured myself a drink. After that night, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a space where 2 people were just waiting each other out. She walked lighter now, like she was stepping around landmines, careful not to set anything else off. I didn't speak much, and when I did, it was only what was necessary. She tried once to sit next to me on the couch the day after the slideshow, holding a coffee like that could fix something. I stood up without a word and went to the other room. She got the message. I didn't press her for details. Not yet. I gave her silence and space, and I let her think that maybe I was calming down. But the truth was, I had started thinking about something else entirely, about how to turn what she had done into something she couldn't just apologize for. I wasn't interested in payback that lasted a minute. I wanted to set something in motion she couldn't stop. 2 days later, she sent me a message while I was working in my home office. It was short and pathetic. Can we talk? Like we were high school kids trying to sort out a breakup. I ignored it. An hour later, she knocked. I didn't answer. She opened the door slowly, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I need to explain, she said. I looked up from my laptop, not because I cared what she had to say, but because I wanted her to see I was listening when she made a fool of herself. She took a breath, probably trying to look sincere, and then started. It didn't start the way you think. At first it was just, "Don't give me the timeline," I said. "You've had enough chances to be honest. I'm not here to help you feel better about yourself." She stepped into the room. "Ethan, I'm trying to fix this." "No, you're trying to manage it. You're trying to control how I respond." "That's not true." "Then why are you only talking now? After I showed you everything? You weren't going to say anything before. You were going to keep going like it was normal." She didn't argue because she knew I was right. She stood there for a while, quiet, and then said something I didn't expect. I ended it. I raised an eyebrow. "Did he know that?" She hesitated. "I told him yesterday. I said it was over. And you think that matters to me?" She took another step forward. "I want to save this." "You can't," I said flatly. She was quiet again. I could see her eyes welling up, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to fall for a performance. "I messed up," she whispered. "I don't have excuses. I was selfish and reckless and I held up a hand. "You're not getting a speech. I'm not your therapist. You can talk all day about what you felt, but it won't change anything." She nodded slowly, then turned and walked out without another word. That was the first time she didn't try to win me back with empty talk. I think it finally hit her that I wasn't playing the role she expected. I wasn't going to get sad and beg or forgive and forget. I wasn't interested in healing anything. That week, I did what needed to be done. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer I knew through one of my clients. He wasn't the type who handled things politely. He was known for being aggressive and efficient, exactly what I needed. I handed him everything: pictures, receipts, timelines, even a typed-out summary of her lies. I didn't leave anything out. He looked through it all without flinching and said, "Well, make sure you walk out clean." We filed the papers without telling her. I wanted it to be a surprise. I had them delivered to her workplace, addressed in a plain envelope. Inside was everything: the divorce notice, the list of assets I was claiming, the attached exhibits proving her behavior, and a short note from me. No conversations needed. I've made my decision. The fallout started the same day. She came home in a mess, holding the papers like they were covered in something toxic. She tried to talk, but I walked past her and went upstairs. She followed me, but I closed the door in her face. She stayed outside the door for 20 minutes, pleading through the wood. I didn't respond once. By the end of the week, she had moved her things into the guest room. She didn't sleep much. I could hear her walking around at night, probably trying to figure out how it all fell apart so fast. She should have seen it coming, but people like her never do. They think they can lie, cheat, twist the truth, and still keep their lives intact. They think people like me will just fold. I didn't. She asked for one more conversation. That's how she phrased it, one more. Like it was something meaningful. Like after all the lies, the hiding, the pretending, she deserved one last chance to say whatever she wanted. At first, I said no. Not out of spite, but because I didn't believe there was anything left to discuss. But after a few days of her walking around like a ghost, barely speaking unless it was about bills or the mailbox or where the spare vacuum bags were kept, I agreed. Not for her. For me. I needed to look her in the eye and say everything I had been keeping in for weeks. I wanted the silence to end with my voice, not hers. We sat in the kitchen. No wine, no candles, no distractions. Just 2 chairs and the truth between them. She looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from guilt, not effort. Her eyes were red. Her fingers were clenched together on the table like she was holding on to herself. I waited for her to start. She didn't. "Go ahead," I said. "You asked for this." She nodded and stared at the table for a few seconds before speaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did. I'm not going to make excuses for it anymore. I made choices that destroyed something we built, and I can't undo them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She continued. It didn't happen because you weren't enough. You were always present, always trying. I was the one who stopped trying. I let boredom get to me. I let the attention get to me. I got used to lying, and I kept doing it because it was easy. Because I didn't think I'd get caught. I interrupted her. You didn't think I'd do anything if I did catch you. That's what you really thought. She swallowed hard. Maybe. I guess I underestimated how much this would hurt you. No, you didn't, I said. You knew exactly what it would do to me. You just didn't care at the time. She flinched. Not because I was loud or aggressive, but because she knew it was true. The silence stretched again. She seemed to be waiting for something, maybe understanding, maybe comfort, maybe the old version of me who used to solve our problems when she felt lost. That guy wasn't in the room anymore. I thought ending it would fix it, she said finally. I thought if I cut it off, you and I could get back to something real. But you're right. I didn't stop for you. I stopped because I got caught. And you're still talking like this is about the affair. It's not just that. It's the months you spent lying to my face. It's the way you pretended nothing was wrong. The way you walked in here after seeing him, laughed, made dinner, and acted like we were still something. She nodded. I don't know how to fix it. You can't, I said plainly. Some things don't get fixed. They get replaced. She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with something close to panic. So that's it? After everything? Yes, I said. After everything. That's exactly why. She stood up and walked around the kitchen like she couldn't sit still anymore. You said we built something. You really want to throw that away? You already did. I'm just making it official. She leaned against the counter. Do you hate me? I looked at her for a long moment. No, I don't hate you. I don't even want to. But I also don't want to live with someone who made me question my own sanity. Who looked me in the eye and lied over and over. That changes everything. Even if I wanted to forgive you, I'd never trust you again. She walked out of the kitchen without saying another word. I didn't follow her. Later that night, she sent me a message. Not a long one. Just a sentence that said she would start looking for a new place. That was the first time she finally took some responsibility without dressing it up in guilt or sorrow. Just a simple, honest statement. I didn't reply. That was the last real conversation we had in that house. There were more words afterward, about logistics, about splitting things up, about mail forwarding and bank accounts. But nothing personal, nothing emotional. That part was finished. She moved out on a Thursday. No ceremony, no awkward hugs, no last-minute begging. Just quiet boxes, a few strained glances, and the dull scrape of furniture being dragged across the floor. I didn't help her. She didn't ask me to. Most of her stuff had already been packed during the nights I pretended to be asleep while she tiptoed around the house like a stranger. I didn't watch her go either. I stayed in the back room with the door shut and waited until I couldn't hear the car anymore. When I came out, the house felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. It just felt real. I spent that weekend cleaning. Not because I wanted to erase anything, but because I needed to move again, even if it was just wiping down counters and vacuuming the same spot twice. I put all her leftover items in a closet and shut the door. I'd deal with them later. I deleted her contact from my phone, took down the photos, canceled the shared accounts, and made a list of everything I had to change. It wasn't anger driving me at that point. It was clarity. The kind you only get when everything breaks and you finally stop pretending. The first few nights alone were strange. I kept expecting the front door to open around 6:15, the sound of keys dropping into the dish, the usual question about dinner. But nothing came. I ate alone, slept alone, and realized I wasn't mourning the person who left. I was mourning the person I thought she was. The version of her I had created in my head, the one who wouldn't lie, who wouldn't trade our life for a few cheap thrills. That person never existed. And it took everything falling apart for me to see it. A few days later, her sister called. She wasn't asking questions, just checking in, saying she'd heard we were separating and wanted to know if I was okay. I didn't tell her the full story. I didn't need to. I said we had different priorities now and that things had run their course. She sounded disappointed but respectful. That was the first time I realized I didn't owe anyone details. People would find out what they found out, but I didn't have to explain myself to anybody. One night, about a week after she moved out, I went for a drive. No destination. Just needed to get out of the house and let my thoughts breathe somewhere else. I ended up at the old diner we used to visit before everything turned to garbage. I sat in a booth alone and ordered the same meal I always did. The waitress recognized me but didn't ask where she was. That was a relief. I ate in silence, paid the bill, and left a tip larger than usual. Not out of generosity, I just didn't want to make change. When I got home that night, I opened the closet where I had stashed her leftovers. Her high school hoodie, a couple of old books, a photo album she hadn't touched in years. I didn't get sentimental. I didn't cry or flip through the pages. I just packed it all into a box, sealed it, and labeled it with her name. I called the courier the next morning and sent it off. No note, no message. Just closure. A few days later, I got a short email from her. No apology this time. Just a thank you for sending the box and a line that said she respected my silence. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I started going to the gym again. Started seeing friends more often. Caught up on work projects I'd been putting off. Everything slowly found its pace. Not because I was trying to rebuild some perfect life, but because I had time again, time that wasn't being spent wondering where she was or what lie she'd tell next. The last thing I did before closing that chapter completely was change the locks. It wasn't about fear or revenge. It was about making it mine again. The house, the life, the routine, everything. Now when people ask, I just tell them the truth. We're done. No big drama, no long stories. Just a quiet ending that took too long to come. And honestly, I feel better than I expected. Not happy. Not yet. But clear. And that's enough for now.